Today we're looking at Lesson 4.1, Graphing Equations in Slope-Intercept Form. We've talked about slope-intercept form before. This is an example of what it looks like. We have y equals mx plus b. The slope is going to replace the m, and the y-intercept value is going to replace the b. So we're first asked to write an equation of a line in slope-intercept form with the given slope and the given y-intercept. So we want to write slope-intercept form. And we're given the slope, which goes in for m. And we're given the y-intercept, which goes in for b. So this would be our equation. Then we're supposed to graph the equation. We're moving away from using a table and intercepts and instead using just this form to be able to graph. So if it's in slope-intercept form, to graph this, I would start at my y-intercept value by putting a point at 3 on the y-axis. So your points are always going to start on the y-axis when you're graphing an equation in slope-intercept form. So my equation is y equals negative 1/2 x plus 3. So I'm first going to put a point at 3 on the y-axis. And then I'm going to use my slope to continue graphing. So my slope is written as negative 1/2. If it is not written as a fraction, I would write the slope as a fraction. Let's say it was written as just a whole number, such as 3. I would write it as 3/1, because that will tell us the direction to draw our line to finish our equation. So what this is telling us, when it is negative 1/2, think of slope as rise over run, so that would tell us to go down 1 on the y-axis, and then we're always going to go to the right first. So the right is going to go 2 spots. So down 1, to the right 2. And I'm going to put a point. Whoops. And down 1 to the right 2, and I'm going to keep going. And once I have more than, or 2 or more points, I can draw my line. Now we're going to try another one. So slope-intercept form asks us to put the m as our slope and the b as the y-intercept. So our slope here is negative 3. So I'm going to put that in for m. And our y-intercept is negative 8. And again, if we're going to graph this, we're going to start at negative 8, putting a point there on the y-axis. So I'm going to put a point at negative 8. My equation is y equals negative 3x plus 8, or plus negative 8. So I'm going to write my slope as a fraction, negative 3/1. So what that's going to tell me to do is go down 3 from my starting point to the right 1. And if I can't fit any more points, I'm going to go back to my starting point, which was at negative 8, and I'm going to continue doing the opposite of what I started with. So instead of down 1, or instead of down 3 to the right 1, I'm going to go up 3 to the left 1 to get one more point. And then I'm going to draw my line. Now we're asked to graph the equation, but it's not in slope-intercept form first. So we need to put it in slope-intercept form, meaning we need to get the y by itself and everything else on the other side. So So I'm going to first start by moving the x value, the whole thing, or the x term, by subtracting it, and then I move it to the other side. Now it was minus 4y, so I'm going to bring down negative 4y. I also subtracted 3, so I'm going to write negative 3x plus 12, since 12 is positive. And I'm using this as my guide on how to write the equation. So I'm going to now need y by itself because everything else is in the correct place. So I just need to get rid of the So I'm going to have to get rid of just the negative 4. So it's negative 4 times y, so I need to divide by negative 4. And whatever I do there, I'm going to divide everything, every term, by negative 4. Now I just need to simplify, so if I have a negative over a negative, it's going to be a positive 3/4 x, and then 12 divided by negative 4 is going to be negative 3, so I'm going to write it as minus 3. So this would be my equation that I need to graph. And I cannot graph it until I put it into slope-intercept form. So I'm going to graph this. This means I'm starting at negative 3 on the y-axis. My slope is positive 3/4, so that means I need to go up 3 to the right 4. I can do that again. If I want to continue over in this section, I want to put a point there. I'm going to go back to the starting point and go down 3 to the left 4 instead. And now I can draw my line through the points. And then now we have another equation that we need to graph, but it's also not in slope-intercept form, so I'm going to first move the x term because I want to get y by itself. So I'm going to move the whole x term to the other side by adding it, bring down 5y, and now I have 2x plus 10, because remember I'm trying to follow slope-intercept form. So I want my equation to look like this setup. So now my last step is just to get rid of the 5 so that the y is by itself. So I would need to divide everything by 5. So my equation would be y equals 2/5 x plus 2 when it's simplified. So that means I'm starting at 2 on the y-axis. And I'm going to go over, or I'm sorry, up 2 to the right 5. And put my point, and then I can draw my line. Now I'm also asked to graph y equals 5 here. So y equals 5, when it's just equal to y, or it's just equal to x, it's going to be either a horizontal line or a vertical line. So in this case, if it is just equal to y, I'm going to graph it as a point at y equals 5. And then I'm going to, since I don't have any other points or slope, I'm going to just draw a horizontal line through y equals 5. Here I have 2y equals 1, so I would need to get y by itself first by dividing by 2. So now I'm left with y equals 1/2. So that's going to be the same thing like I did before, but I'm just going to go to y equals 1/2 and put a point. And then again, I can just draw a horizontal line through y equals 1/2. I also could draw just a vertical line, when I have it equal to x, I would just go to the x-axis and go to x equals 2. And I would just draw my line right through x equals 2 if it's just equal to x. Here they've already graphed the equation for us, so we're looking for two key things on the graph to help us pick which equation out of these four that they've listed. So we need to look first at where it crosses the y-axis, which would be here, and that is at -1. So that means we can cross out the equations that don't have -1 as their y-intercepts. Then we would need to see how they got from the first point at the y-axis to the second point. So it looks like you would need to go up 1 to the right 4. So that would mean the slope would have to be 1/4. So that crosses out that equation. So we would choose this equation as our answer. Here we're asked to write an equation, so we usually assume if they just say write an equation that it needs to be in slope-intercept form. So we're looking for the slope and the y-intercept. We also need to determine which is our y value and which is our x value so that we can replace it with the letters p and n instead of y and x. So if you think about which is dependent on the other, the profit would depend on the number of sandwiches sold. So that means the profit is your y and the number of sandwiches is your x. So normally we would write y equals mx plus b. Instead of y, we're going to replace it with p for profit, and instead of x, we're going to replace it with n for number of sandwiches sold. Now we need to look for the slope and the y-intercept. So for the slope, we're going to look for a rate. And if we look at this problem, it says the Band Boosters are selling sandwiches for $5 each. That is a rate. So sometimes you'll see the word per or for each. Okay, that would indicate that it's a rate. So that's going to go in for M. Now we need to look for the y-intercept. The y-intercept is usually the starting point, so it's going to be some sort of starting value or initial fee or flat fee, which would need to be $1,160 because that's what they started by buying. So if they bought that, and we think about that as related to profit, that means it's going to have to be subtracted in the equation, since you're subtracting it off of the profits. So it's going to be minus 1160 instead of plus 1160. And then we would have our equation. Next, we're asked to graph the equation. So we would need to draw our graph. Usually with word problems, you can draw your graphs with only one quadrant. So since it has a large negative value for y, I'm going to use the fourth quadrant here. So this is going to be our y-axis, this is going to be our x-axis. And I'm going to go by ones for the x. Actually, we might want to go by a larger number for the x. So let's think about the y values first. If we are starting at negative 1160, I would want to at least go by 100. Maybe we could go by hundreds. That's not even going to be enough. So maybe by 200s. And you can kind of guess and check here, see which ones will fit better, and just make that scale the same as you go down the y-axis. And then place your point at about 1160, which would be a little bit past 1100. Then we're going to be going up 5 over 1. So since our y-axis is such a large scale, we're going to have to think of what would be the same thing as 5 over 1 if simplified, but in terms of 200. So think about how you would get from 5 to 200. You'd have to multiply by 40, right? So that means 5 over 1 is the same thing as 200 over 40. Oops. So my x's, then, I should go by 40s. And then I would continue then. So I'm going to go up 200 from 1160, which is going to give it about 960, and then over 40. So that's going to be about here. And then we keep going. 960 plus 200 is 760 over 40. About there. And then continue. Then we're down to 560 over 40. And we have our points. So we can draw the line. And then the last part is using the equation to answer a question. So P equals 5n minus 1160 was the equation. Now it says find the total profit, or P, if you have 1,400 sandwiches sold. So we're going to put in 1,400 for n. So we have 7,000 minus 1160, which would give us 5840. So the profit would be $5,840. And that concludes lesson 4.1.